I'm Al McFarlane. Welcome to Conversations with Al McFarlane. Glad to be here and glad to have you along as well. And today, a special presentation. I have to begin with a part of a presentation or brief presentation made this Saturday at North Hennepin Community College. It was the South Sudan Peace Conference. The theme of it was building a roadmap to a sustainable uh, peace in South Sudan. And as you know, since that country won its freedom from Sudan, the North, about 10 years ago, the South itself has been embroiled in internal civil war, generally along tribal lines, generally the Nuer and the Dinka, the two major tribes, but other tribes as well. And so the promise and the wealth and the agricultural drive that were possible have all been kind of uh, derailed because of the internal strife in South Sudan. Well, a former colleague and a close friend of mine, Ambassador Ladu Jada Gubek, convened this meeting this past weekend at North Hennepin Community College. Again, the theme was building a roadmap to a sustainable peace in South Sudan, and delegates from around the country came and talked about it. I'm going to be streaming that over the next several days. But one of the things I did stream on Saturday was a presentation by my own colleague, Dr. Benjamin F. Chavis, who is the Executive Director, CEO of National Newspaper Publishers Association. So we're going to start the program with that brief presentation, and then we'll go into another conversation today, expecting guests to join us who are talking about challenges for members of the East African community, and particularly around the question of opioid use and abuse. Well, let's check out Dr. Benjamin Chavis first, who presented Saturday at North Hennepin Community College at the South Sudan Peace Conference.
Thank you very much. Observing all protocol, to all the ambassadors, to all the dignitaries, elected officials, brothers and sisters. I bring you greetings from the National Newspaper Publishers Association, which represents 230 African-American owned newspapers across the United States. We reach about 30 million people a week in print. We have two papers here in Minneapolis, the Minnesota Spokesman and the Inside News. I want to thank the planners of the conference for inviting me to participate in what I think is a very, very important conference. My background is that I'm born in North Carolina in 1948. I was sort of brought up in the civil rights movement. And my sister, who's 14 years older than me, she's a college professor. She married a brother from Juba. In fact, the wedding was in Juba, Paul Anadi Bartho. So I come, and they have a beautiful daughter named Ajula, who is a lawyer now in North Carolina. So I stand before you not just as a distant advocate of the South Sudan, but we're family. Family. I also just want to echo something that the Prime Minister said earlier about the struggle in Sri Lanka. The truth of the matter is, all liberation movements, all struggles for self-determination, all struggles for human rights are interconnected, are related. Dr. King, when I started working with Dr. King, I was 14 years old. And thank God that my parents allowed me to work for Martin Luther King Jr. at such an early age. I put my age up. I was driving when I was 14, needed mobility. And I learned a lot. And of course, when my sister married a brother from Juba, I tried to learn much more about what was going on in the Sudan. I was very much involved in the 1960s and the 1970s with the liberation movement in Africa. Actually, for a short period of time, I moved to Angola. I was working with the MLPLA, the ANC. I was working with SWAPO in Namibia and a lot of the liberation movement. So over my career, I had a chance to meet in person and have dialogue with John Garang on several occasions. In fact, I took an honor to meet with him once in Washington, D.C. And so I come to this conference, which is my understanding, the title is Getting a Pathway, a Roadmap for Sustainable Peace in the South Sudan. Sustainable peace. I believe that our brothers and sisters in the South Sudan, I think you're a blessed people. You're not a cursed people. You're a blessed people. And everybody, outside of the Sudan, outside of South Sudan, they focus on your natural resources, on the oil and other things. But to me, the most important resource that the South Sudan has is the people. People, men, women, and children. And I think that I'm glad I got here a little early to hear some of the other presentations. I think that this is a discussion that needs to continue. And one of the things I want to work on is to make sure that the outcomes of this conference, that we kind of raise public awareness in America about the South Sudan. Um, because I'm in the media business, I follow trends and uh, not just the headlines, but what happens in the depths of the stories about Africa. And in general, most of the stories about Africa in the American press are not, they're negative by and large. Once in a while, there's a positive story, but most are negative. And I think that we need to take charge. So part of the role of having sustainable peace in the Sudan, in the South Sudan, make sure that the South Sudan, that you control your own messaging, that you control your own press, that you control your own distribution of the truth. And so I've come today to announce that I've already met with my board of the National Newspaper Publishers Association. From this day forward, we're going to start covering what you say about the South Sudan and not what AP or UPI or somebody else. It's very, very important. We live in a digital age. Everybody has their device. But unfortunately, a lot of information on these devices is not accurate. So you got to have a trusted source where people can go find out the truth of what is going on in the South Sudan, where people can be in solidarity, but be in solidarity in a way that improves the quality of life of the brothers and sisters who are in the South Sudan. And I've given this a lot of thought. Um, and some of you know that when my brother-in-law went back, when Paul and I went back to the Sudan, he was killed, in Juba. And we pledged, my sister, who was his wife for 30 years, passed away earlier this year. And at her funeral, I said, and I'm going to repeat here today, that we're going to keep the spirit of Paul and the author alive in everything that we do, and the people of the South Sudan in everything that we do. I believe that the self-determination of the people of South Sudan is not only worthy of our support, it is critical that we show our support, and not just for one instance, but ongoingly. So I'm going to be looking forward to meeting more of you closely, exchange contacts. I think the message, even from this conference, is so important. Sometimes we speak to ourselves, which is okay, but you need to speak to the world. The world needs to hear about the South Sudan. Now, I don't want to step on anybody's toes, but most African nations, including probably the South Sudan, and hire these high-powered PR firms in Washington, D.C. to represent your interests. They take your money, and then they do not represent your interests. I just want to, and I'm not asking for a job. I'm saying we're going to do this because I'm in solidarity with you. I think it's very important that we get this word out, and some of the positive stories. I think we have to be careful. We should always be balanced. We should not just focus on the contradictions, the suffering, but should also focus on how we're overcoming those contradictions, how we're overcoming those sufferings, and so that we can make a better day for another generation to come. Just a little story from the civil rights movement. When we were down in Alabama and Mississippi and Georgia, and even my home state, North Carolina, our theme song was "We Shall Overcome." We were not overcoming, but we sang the song anyway because we had faith that we will need to persevere, that we're not going to allow the forces of oppression to determine our destiny. And I must thank God when the Sudanese finally, the Southern Sudanese, finally came together. But as you know, even after you declare independence, there's still problems. There's still internal things. And a lot of times, a lot of the tribal difficulties are imposed from outside forces, pitting one group against another group. And I think that if all of the tribes in the South Sudan would find ways how to work together, how to unite, how to protect one another, how to lift up each other, I think the South Sudan has a very positive future, but it's going to take a lot of work. And at the end of the day, to make sure that the policies, that the programs, that the projects serve the needs of the people on the ground. And I think that that is happening. I mentioned to you that I worked in Angola. I was so involved with the liberation movement in Angola. I was in Angola when the Cuban troops were there. I'm also a minister. So I was serving communion to Cuban troops in the foxholes as they were fighting the apartheid regime, South African forces. Uh, but one of the things the Angolans told me, said, well, Reverend Chambers, if you really want to help Africa, you got to go back and change the United States. Because a lot of the policies out of the United States affect the quality of life of Africa. I'm glad you had the ambassador on earlier. I think we not only need engagement, I think the Biden-Harris administration is open, but they also need to make sure they get the right information, the right time. They have to keep pushing. Don't stop pushing. Always keep pushing. And even when you win a victory, keep pushing. Because the victory you win today, if you don't protect it, it'll become the failure for tomorrow. And I'm not lecturing to you. I'm saying I'm speaking to you as a comrade in struggle. I'm speaking to you as a brother. I'm speaking to you as one who believes in the future of Africa, who believes in the horizon when all of Africa will rise to its chosen God-given destiny. And I think the Sudan, particularly the South Sudan, is a place that has been long overlooked by the rest of the world. And I think South Sudan's time is now. South Sudan's time is now. So in my short time, I just want to say three things. Number one, I mentioned the importance of working on the media. I think that there needs to be an overarching, the New Dawn Foundation, I think you need an overarching portal where people can go and find the accurate information. Also, with the embassy of the South Sudan to the United States, I think the embassy's website also has to have a section about current news coming directly from the South Sudan. Uh, those of us who live in the United States, when we have political science classes, they tell all of us in college, if you want to find out anything about the Africa, you go to the CIA World Book. The CIA maintains a book on every nation, not just every African nation, on every nation. And if you, this morning, so I got up and I said, let me see what the CIA is saying about the South Sudan. And it's interesting. It said that it was a new nation, the youngest nation, of great promise. But it also said that internal contradictions were preventing the fulfillment of the promise. And of course, when I read that, and I'm gonna say, well, I hope the CIA is not feeding those internal contradictions. Because the truth of the matter is, if we look at the history of colonization, decolonization of Africa, the way Africa was carved up, uh, not by Africans, it served the interests of the former colonial powers. It served the interests of the former neo-colonial powers. And even today, where Africa has the greatest natural resources of any continent in the world, and yet Africa today has also some of the greatest poverty, some of the greatest homelessness, some of the greatest hunger, some of the greatest absence of fresh water. So, and these are problems that we should not just expect the former colonial powers to resolve. These are problems that we can resolve among ourselves, but it's going to take unity. And so I've come today, number one, to say we're going to help you, at least the black press in America, we're going to help you with the press, getting that positive word out. Number two, there are 54, 55 members of Congress of the Congressional Black Caucus. I'm going to ask the head of the Congressional Black Caucus, her name is Joyce Beatty, she's from Ohio. I think the Congressional Black Caucus ambassadors needs to have a session about the South Sudan. Because if you poll most of the 55 members of Congress about the South Sudan, they say, oh yeah, I heard about it, but I really don't know that much. You know, and I think there's more than enough room, but responsibility. I remember when Donald Payne was chair of the Africa Committee, he's passed away. He was a congressman from New Jersey. His focus was on Africa and did a lot of work. But over the years, I've seen sort of not a lack of focus, but so much is going on in the world. The world's attention right now is on Ukraine, and that's good. I think the world should pay attention to what's going on in Ukraine. But what was going on in Africa uh, predates what's going on in Ukraine. And it's interesting to me what becomes of a national priority, what becomes of a national issue. And I believe working with members of the Congressional Black Caucus, we can make sustainable peace in South Sudan a national priority of the United States. That's what I want to see happen. And then thirdly, it's much more on how we relate to one another. I was so proud of my sister Helen and Paul and Nadi Otho because when Nadi came here and got his degree from the University of Wisconsin and then did work in North Carolina and worked some together in Washington, D.C., I was a former head of the NAACP at the time. And the thing that I loved about Anada and Helen, they wanted to make sure that they help other Sudanese. So from the early 1990s, actually late 1980s, early 1990s, they helped over 100 students from the Sudanese, from South Sudan come to the United States to get relocated, get an education. And we need to continue that. I hope that there's ways and means how we can make sure that we work on making sure that there's kind of exchange programs. And I know the State Department, you know, how they viewed the Sudan and how they viewed the South Sudan was different. But I'm talking about now scholarships, access to visas, access to travel visas, access to student visas. I think that's something we need to pay attention to. I want to make sure that South Sudanese do not get triaged in the process of immigration. I think the doors need to be wide open. It's interesting because of the Ukrainian conflict, uh, people can arrive from Ukraine and get a visa, a passport, temporary documents in hours. But yet from Africa, sometimes it takes years. We're going to stop that. I want to see, I want to see access. All countries ought to be treated fairly. All countries ought to be treated equally. And I think that if we don't raise our voices about it, it will continue to be the way it is. The reason why I've been involved in the civil rights movement all my life, I'm 74 years old. I got involved when I was 12. So that means I've been involved about 60 years. And one of the things I've learned is that freedom, and Frederick Douglass said it right, freedom is a constant struggle. It is a constant struggle, you know. And if you let down your guard, people will try to take advantage of you. And so I'm here to encourage you. I know you come from different parts of the United States to this conference. I'm glad you had my man Keith Ellison, Brain Green. He's a good attorney general. Let's give Keith Ellison another hand. He's a good attorney general. And I know that I'm in Minneapolis, and I came here during the George Floyd thing. But, you know, the conditions that Black Americans face in America are still all kind of tenuous. Um, we, while the Biden-Harris administration is trying to go in a positive direction, there's a force, you know, trying to take the United States back in a backwards direction. The recent Supreme Court decision is an indication that they're going to start passing laws to dismantle some of the things that we fought for, like voting rights, you know, like human rights. But we're not going to give up. In 2020, there was a record Black voter turnout. In 2024, we're working to make sure there's a record Black voter turnout, despite what the media says is that the Republicans are going to take over everything. Sometimes putting out those messages makes people feel like their efforts are in vain. And that's why I always tell all of my editors of my Black newspapers across the country, it's just not the headline, but it's what you say. Make sure that at the end of the day that you encourage people. Tell them the truth, absolutely. Speak truth to power, but speak truth to power in a way that lifts people's spirits up, rather than try to make people feel depressed, that like they're hopeless. You know, I believe that the world, the pendulum toward justice is definitely going in the right direction, but it requires much more organization. I really like the spirit again from you, Prime Minister. You really represent your people adequately with that spirit. Continue, and we pray for you, and we are also in solidarity with your people. Thank you. The last thing I want to say, I'm going to stay within my time limit. The last thing I want to say is simply this. As I look out at each of you today, I see the past, but I also see the future. And the future that I see is that a day will come where your children and grandchildren will lift their heads up high because of the progress of the South Sudan, because of the progress toward having a sustainable peace. We have to teach our children to be freedom fighters in all walks of life and never to forget the past. We should learn from the past, not repeat the past, learn from it. And what can we learn from the Sudan? What can we learn from the South Sudan? What can we learn from even what is going on today? Take that learning and come up with programs to make sure that we push forward. I think our young people today in the South Sudan, our young people in America, our young people all over the world, it's the best generation of youth we've ever been blessed to witness. They're intelligent, they're gifted, they're talented. The only thing they need is encouragement, and that's our job. That's our job. Long live the spirit of South Sudan. Long live the spirit of South Sudan.
Well, there we go. That was a presentation by Dr. Benjamin F. Chavez, the Executive Director, President, CEO of National Newspaper Publishers Association. And he was addressing the South Sudan Peace Conference held this weekend out at North Hennepin Community College. The theme was Building a Road to Sustainable Peace in South Sudan. We're going to present other parts of the presentation in the days ahead, but we were happy to share that with you today. And it leads to today's program. We've got guests who are here from the Horn of Africa and who want to share with us a story both to educate, illuminate, and engage us with them and get us together in building community, in addressing, both assessing and addressing the health of our community. I'm pleased to welcome Ilhan Hashi and, make me say this right, Ekbal. And you have to unmute. And I only see one name, so maybe put your whole name in the description there.
Sarah is my name, Ekbal.
Ekbal, okay. And so change your name there so your full name is there, if you don't mind.
Sounds good.
Okay, great. Well, first of all, thank you for being here. And we want to talk about your work dealing with education and health in the East African community. Who wants to go first?
So I can go first, for sure.
Why don't you do that? Introduce yourself and your work and set up the conversation for the balance of today's program. And thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. So my name is Ekbal Farah. I'm currently a program manager in LADC at MABS Recovery Center, which is a culturally specific treatment center tailored for East African women and women of the Islamic faith. So what I do is I definitely work with the clinical aspect of things and do group and do one-on-one with young women who are struggling with substance use disorder. And what me and Ilhan have created was a program to help educate our community, especially people from the East African communities and other immigrant communities, about how to prevent substance use disorder, because I'm starting to see that there was a need for education and awareness around that topic.
Okay, and the name of the organization, maybe a website or addresses people can look up.
Yes, so we're called Educated Doses. Where our website is actually still under development. We're working on that right now. We're pretty new, but we want to get our work out there. So far, we've kind of worked in the communities and stuff. Most of our work has been done inside of MABS Recovery Center. So talking to families and communities about awareness and educating people on the dangers and effects associated with substance use disorder. So Educated Doses Prevention Program is a substance use prevention program geared towards, but not limited to, high school youth and middle school youth ages 12 to 17 and their families from East African communities and other immigrant communities. We've created Educated Doses program to educate and prevent adolescents and their families and their communities about the risk factors and dangers of using substances, to help empower them and avoid drug use, to educate them on the negative effects and the dangers associated. So basically, we noticed that there was a high need in education, because some of my clients that I work with oftentimes kind of imply that they weren't aware of the things they were getting into. They're not aware of the effects, the long-term effects, the physiological effects, and other effects that happen to them. Oftentimes the community that we work with are very new to the country. So like addiction is very, very much so new to them. So when they're taking things like opioids, they're not really aware of the long-term dangers that can happen to them and the long-term effects. They're not aware of things like withdrawal, even though this is something that we're very aware of. Some people who come from the communities of the East African descent are not aware of things like withdrawals and like triggers and coping skills. So education is really something that we're really passionate about. And as someone who calls herself a student of life, I feel like I love to educate and teach, and that is something that I'm very passionate about right now. So Educated Doses is a comprehensive drug prevention curriculum, and our main goal is really to get into schools as well in the future, because I would love to provide that curriculum inside of a lot of charter schools and public schools in the future. But right now, our main focus was the community and things, and then Han can continue and kind of share some of the places that we've did our work and provided our education.
Go ahead, Ilhan.
Hello, so I'm Ilhan. I am currently a senior at Metro State University. I'm pursuing a career as a licensed alcohol and drug counselor. I also work at MABS Recovery Center. Iqbal and I have been working on educated doses for a while. So what we like to do is we usually like to set up shop in places that our community, like for example, like the Cedar Riverside community. We like to go to St. Paul, where there is a large where the East African community is mostly populated. And we have like a few PowerPoints where we just kind of like educate them about like what addiction is, the types of substances that, these children may be exposed to, how addiction starts, teaching them that this is a disease. Because a lot of times in our community, it's like, oh, you're taking these drugs by choice, and they don't realize that addiction is a disease. And then like we talk about things like how to recognize addiction, the long-term effects of using alcohol or other drugs. And then we teach them about what makes addiction a disease. So we like to go to like Carmel, places in our community where we know that we can just kind of like set up shop, and people just kind of like stop by, talk to us, and then they ask us questions and stuff like that. But our goal is to eventually, we want to pitch our curriculum to schools so that we can have like a program, our curriculum into the school systems.
Is your target the young people, or is it the community at large? Is there a strategy that addresses addiction or substance disorder in middle-aged and in elders, maybe people that had like maybe some kind of an accident or injury where they got in treatment? A lot of times people have a traumatic experience, go to their doctor, and for pain management, they get introduced to Oxycontin or things like that. Then they find themselves needing that relief. And once they go past the period of time where they really have begun healing, their mind still tells them that their body is in pain or in danger or fear of pain. So they seek out, and that's where the craving begins. That's the addiction, as I understand it. So what are the levels that you all are addressing in particular, whether it's just the kids or the middle-aged people, the working age people, or the elders, or is it all three?
So that's actually a really great question. What we do is we try to educate as much people as possible, but our main focus is the young people, because we understand that young children and young adults are the leaders of tomorrow, and they are our future. And we're starting to see a lot more children dabbling into things like vaping and tobacco, and they're also getting familiar with things like opioids. We definitely like to educate them. And what we do is use like age appropriate language to kind of gauge with the younger kids, the students from ages 12 to 17. And when we do talk to people a little bit older, we like to also speak to them in their language so they have a better understanding. So when we're talking to basically people from the East African community who are a bit older, who English isn't their first language, we like to kind of deliver our content in a language that they're able to understand it more, because a lot of them actually do have pain. They get into really traumatic accidents where it's like a car accident or something where they're prescribed opioids, but their doctor hasn't really kind of educated them on how to use this and like managing pain in different ways. So they get really dependent on these medication, and they don't know how to stop it, which is when addiction and withdrawal happens, and they're not aware of it. So they keep thinking that this perceived pain is coming back and back and back, but they're not really educated and aware of how to handle it in a different way. So then they go to other things like, meth and heroin and alcohol and other things that are very adverse to their health and well-being. So we like to educate everybody, but I feel like with us, we want to start with the young people right now. but we're not limited to young people. We like to start with young kids right now because we're starting to see a lot of substance use disorders starting with kids at the ages of 16, 12. I have a few friends in the school systems who are teachers, and they're always telling me how their kids are smoking tobacco vapes in the house or in the schools and things like that, and their parents aren't aware of what they're doing. So it's like we like to target the younger community so they can make better decisions on how to navigate life substance free in the future and be, active members in their society, substance use free.
Let me ask both of you to sort of walk us through the reality of substance use versus the perception, both internally and externally. What do you mean, Al McFarlane? I mean, that there is a general perception that the Islamic community, as a question of sort of practice and standards, uh, uh, disavows or discourages, like all religions, abuse of drugs and the use of alcohol and intoxicants in general. And so, at one level, a person who has seen the community from the outside is surprised to learn that alcohol abuse is a problem. Shouldn't be, because everybody's a human and everybody is capable and has access. But there's a perception that if my Islamic brothers don't, engage in alcohol, then alcohol shouldn't be a problem in that community. But that's not the case, or is it? Tell me.
So, with all substances is actually prohibited in the Islamic faith, and a lot of people are using substances to heal. Unfortunately, people with substance use disorders, people with mental health issues, and there's a lot of things where not just our faith, but our community as a whole kind of sweeps under the rug because there's this stigmatization that happens where people don't want to talk about addiction or people don't want to talk about mental health issues or the trauma that they've gone to. So they use coping skills by using drugs or alcohol and things like that so they can numb out their pain. And most of the times, the clients that I see are kind of running away from their traumas or their mental health because they're not aware that they have these things happening to them, and it's not been something that they've actually went to go get diagnosed. So most of the times they have underlying mental health diagnoses, and they are very fearful and shameful in having these things that are not really their fault. So they start to use drugs and alcohol on a very they're very how should I say this? They kind of cover it up and they're not really out there.
Secretive, yeah, yeah.
Way, very sneaky way, and it's like they don't share with their families. Sometimes their families don't even know what they're up to or the substances they're using, or they're hiding it, or they're just telling their parents, oh, it's just marijuana. Or
it's not like they're sitting around with the family listening to music and smoking a joint or drinking or having a drink. That's not happening.
Yeah, no, that's definitely not happening. And the thing is, because they know that if their parents or their family members understand that they do have a substance use disorder or they're using drugs or alcohol to cope with the pains that they're going through, that they might feel like they're going to get kicked out of the house or they won't get the support that they need. And oftentimes that's what we're starting to see in the East African communities, because we stigmatize substance use and mental health so bad that it's causing an issue for people to kind of talk about it. And there's nothing wrong with it. People deserve help. And that's another thing that we want to be able to kind of like educate our community. Like, people are going to like have addiction and mental health, but it's like, how are we as a community going to come together, teach these people and kind of help them heal in a very productive and beneficial manner, right? Because again, this is not something that they talk about. And like, if we go back to, their countries back in Somalia or other places in East Africa, drinking and drugs was not prevalent. It wasn't something that was done back home. So now that they're coming to a newer country where it's easily accessible, they're not really used to it, which is why they dive so hard into addiction, because it's not something that they're used to and they're not really educated on.
And the culture here really drives alcohol consumption and even drives so-called illegal or illicit drugs, while it prosecutes them, but it's ambivalent. So there's a really ambivalence about the use of drugs, and plus the medical industry, has to say it doesn't have clean hands because it prescribes and overprescribes. And, so there's litigation and lawsuits by states challenging the manufacturers and the distributors of even legal drugs that cause them to be overprescribed, overused, and overaccessed to the detriment of individuals and communities, in particular communities of color. And so I have another question. How much trauma or experience from coming out of generally a war situation or a strike situation at home, and it could be Ethiopia, it could be Somalia, anywhere in the Horn of Africa where there has been turmoil. What does that, or like my previous guest, Dr. Shabas was speaking to a community of South Sudanese who 20 years of war between Khartoum and Juba, the South Sudan and the Sudanese government, and now that they succeeded and created their new country, even among the South Sudanese, ongoing civil war, stress, strife, death, and war crimes. And so, how do people come out of those situations and find their way here where they don't have that daily threat of the potential of getting killed or shot or kidnapped or being, without food or electricity or transportation or work, or being perceived as the enemy of somebody? You don't have that, but you still have challenges here. You have the memory of that, and if not you, your parents do, and that experience they had somehow affects the young people, even those who are born here. So think about that. Tell me about that. What are your thoughts?
So trauma is carried through the DNA, right? So a lot of times, like for example, the war in Somalia was 30 years ago, but a lot of people are still dealing with those effects now. A lot of people were fled their country from, a drought, war, famine, so many different things. A lot of trauma has happened where it's been carried from the mother to the child, and maybe the parents are still dealing with it and they're not able to kind of like get the help that they need because they are not aware of their mental health disorders or their issues that they're dealing with, which is why it's very hard for people to kind of understand that there is substance use in the family and mental health in the family, because again, mental health is not something people talk about back home. It's not something that even exists. And even if they do, it's very stigmatized. They just call that person crazy, or, they just don't really give it the attention that they really do need. And the thing is, a lot of Somalis and people from the East African region of Africa are coming to places like Minnesota in large numbers and stuff, and they're still dealing with it because unfortunately our country back is still redeveloping and it's still getting back to the place, but there's still a lot of trauma there. There's still a lot of conflict happening, a lot of tribal, conflict and stuff that affects people today, because a lot of the people in my community still are very in touch with their families and their friends back home. So they're very aware, and these things still affect them today. Even though the younger generation here from the Somali descent were born and raised here, they're still affected as well because their parents can be affected. Most of the times they're unaware of the fact that they have, depression or anxiety, things like bipolar disorder and things like that, without really getting the help that they need. They usually go through, they read the Quran, or they have spiritual ways of trying to heal, which is not fully the most effective, because we would like to teach them that medication's okay and seeking a therapist is okay. But also these services are very much so limited because we don't have people who are able to kind of talk to these people in a language where they're able to understand, right? But now we're starting to see a lot more. I would like to think we're seeing a lot more treatment centers of Somali descent and places that are helping people, but there's still a lot of need that needs to be done. Mental health is definitely important, and I want to stress that our community is still working towards understanding it fully. I don't really think they're there yet, but like they're working there, and I can see that people are becoming more aware in a sense.
I'm Al McFarlane. This is Conversations with Al McFarlane, speaking with, let me say the name. Tell me one more time.
Ekbal?
Ekbal. Okay,
Yes.
Ekbal Farah and Ilhan Hashi. Thank you both for being here. They are working with an organization called Educated Doses. It looks at substance abuse or substance use disorders in the African communities, Horn of Africa. And I want to open it up so that my colleagues here Diana and Dee and Brenda can either raise questions or make observations. And like me, thank you for the work that you do. And I think we all are pledging our support in your mission to educate and to acquire the resources you need to be effective in serving the family and the communities that you represent. Diane, any questions or thoughts, or Dee or
I
Brenda?
just want to say, Al, I appreciate both you ladies for being on today, and for those that are listening and watching, they're going to do a pretty presentation on May the 20th at the coalition meeting. So look for them then if you're interested in learning more about the educated doses. But I'm really pleased to know that they are having the same issues that everyone else is, and that they're taking an initiative to look into this. Thank you again.
Thank you so much for having us.
Any questions or thoughts, Dee? Brenda, jump in. You muted, I think, Brenda.
Good afternoon. I was just curious as to how your community assimilates the youth into education, into public education, into going into regular classrooms, maybe struggling with a language barrier or whatever. Are there social workers or counselors that are specifically aimed to helping the East African community and the youth and families?
So Brenda, you was breaking up for me, so I think I lost a little connection. But from what I understand, you're asking me how we're able to deliver this in a language appropriate to people who are non-English speaking. Is that right?
Yes, and also assimilating them into regular classes in the schools that they attend. I'm a former teacher, so I know what the classrooms are like when you have diverse ethnic backgrounds and languages. So I was wondering how that
we are providing these services not just in English but also in Somali. We try to get an interpreter as well.
That's what I was wondering. Yeah.
Hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I think we broke up. Okay. So what we are doing is actually incorporating some of these lessons and curriculums in languages that are understandable. So in English and Somali, and we're working on curriculum that is in the language that they are more familiar with and more fluent with. We're actually working on a YouTube channel where we can provide very short videos of the introduction of substance use disorder, how it starts, what to do, all in English, Somali, Oromo, Spanish.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, so that's what we want to do. And I think that is where our education drives comes from, because again, language barrier is a big thing that we're seeing. We speak in English a lot and we're able to kind of identify certain terms, but like things like withdrawal, like again, substance use disorder, these are things people are not aware of. They're not really understanding what these words or these terms mean. So basically talking to them in a language where they're more comfortable with understanding and responding to, and that's kind of what we're working on right now. So we're coming out with a YouTube channel where we provide little educational videos in any languages, like again, Somali, Oromo, Spanish, and even Hmong as well. So,
and helping with the cultural shock when they get here.
All of that will be in our videos, and even understanding the cultural barriers from coming from a war-torn country to America, and understanding how to assimilate and how to just navigate life substance-free and in a beneficial way.
Very good. Thank you.
I often ask my guests to tell their personal stories, so I'm excited to ask you the same question, Iqbal and Ilhan. What's your own personal family story, and how have you come to the work and the profession that you've undertaken? And I want to ask you what your vision is for the community and for humanity. So, Iqbal, start with you.
So my family is actually from Somalia. I was actually not born in Somalia. I was born and raised in Canada. So, but my parents definitely experienced a lot of trauma back home and things like that. Also, I got very interested in becoming an LADC, which is a licensed drug and alcohol counselor, when I was in school for my nursing program, actually. So I was actually studying to be a nurse. And then I started to see that there was a need for education for substance use and providing substance use education and even treatment that is relatable to people of the East African descent. Again, like I had family members and friends who were struggling with addiction towards alcohol, opioids. They had underlying mental health conditions, but nobody really took it serious. Again, it was something that was just, placed under the rug or just ignored because they didn't see it as a big problem, or they thought it was a choice. Like you choose to, use drugs or you choose to drink. You don't want to stop, and they don't understand how you can develop an addiction or dependency to these things. So like I kind of left the nursing program and I went to school here at Metropolitan State University as well. And I enrolled into the LADC program. And that's when I started to really enjoy what I'm learning and what to do and stuff like that. So I started working in places like Alliance Wellness Center. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar, but that's actually a male, East African male treatment center in Bloomington. They do provide outpatient and inpatient as well. And that's when I started to see that there was a large community of Somali men there. And then when I left, I started to do my research and start to look for more places that are for women, and females who are struggling with addiction. And I found a place called MABS Recovery Center. It is a small inpatient as well. We only have 6 beds right now, but they're looking to grow, and they are understanding that there is a need as well for women who are struggling with addiction, who are from the East African descent and Muslim faith. So that is where my drive comes from, because I want to help. I had a few family members who struggled with addiction, and I was the only one who was able to kind of understand their struggles and help them get the therapy that they need and the treatment that they need. And when they were able to get those services and resources, they were able to integrate back into their community in their best ways. And that's something that brings joy to me.
Your vision for your community, our community, what would you say that is?
Basically having more awareness and being educated. I think that's my main goal, and just being educated, because again, we can't stop people from from doing drugs and alcohol, but we can educate them where they're able to make better choices for themselves. People are going to do what they want to do, right? But like, if they're not aware of the things that they're doing, they're not gonna, make positive choices. And we just want to be able to teach them what a clean and safe environment looks like and how to create that with themselves.
Ilhan, what are your thoughts? What's your personal story? And thank you again for being here.
So I kind of when I was in school, I really didn't know what exactly I wanted to go to school for.
Are you born here or born?
Oh, so yes, I was born and raised here, born in Minnesota, lived here my whole life.
Okay.
My parents are from Somalia. I have 7 younger siblings and an older sister. So growing up here, I went to South High School, seen a lot of people that I went to school with kind of like live an addiction-centered lifestyle. I've seen some family members who passed away because of like the opioid crisis. So like 2019, I think that's when I realized in our community, like we really needed to do something. And that's when I changed my major, and I ended up going into the alcohol and addiction field. I think that we need more people in our community that go into the mental health field, the addiction field, because that's just something that we don't talk about. It's like, it's a very taboo. Anytime someone is struggling with, if they're going through any struggles, whether it's addiction or mental health, it's something that they keep to themselves, and they will never reach out for help. So I feel like a lot of people are isolating themselves, and a lot of families who have a child or an individual that's dealing with addiction, it's like the family's affected as well. So they feel like now, they can't really be around people or talk about their struggles, because it's just, I don't know. Our culture is very, like, we have some toxic traits, but that's something that we want to work on and, like, teach parents and families that, like, it's okay, like, everyone goes through this, like,
Mhm.
create a support group for them or something like that. But I hope to, like Iqbal said, educate our community, also work closely with individuals that are passionate and be an advocate for people that are going through addiction. And yeah.
Great. Well, it's great to hear this. Any other questions or comments? I tell people that two things come to mind. I enjoy talking to people who are first or second generation. I'm first generation. My father is a Cuban born Jamaican, born in Cuba. His parents moved back to Cuba, and then he came here, and his sisters and brothers all followed. So I have this experience of being the son of an immigrant on my father's side, and it gives you a sense of what the story, the feeling, the experiences might be somehow the same, but somehow different, and interesting. But my mother's side of the family, generations here through the slave trade, but mother and father, since we're in the New World, in the Western Hemisphere, both victims of the transatlantic slave trade, and we obviously have our roots in West Africa or Central Africa. And so I like sharing that and asking others to share their story, their genealogy, as much as they are willing to and like to, because beneath it all is a sense of the appreciation and the value of family and the value of culture and the value of retaining culture and not surrendering uh, all the beauty that we come into the world with through the lived experiences of our fathers and our mothers and our grandmothers and grandfathers and all of the ancestors. And I operate with the sense that we are always surrounded by the ancestors, that they guide us, they keep us, and they are nudging us to be decent and to be good people and to make ourselves proud of ourselves and to make them proud of us as well. And they also remind us that we have to live in a way that will make our neighbors and our children and grandchildren proud as well. Create a story that can be told and shared across generations of people who believed in human decency and who operated with respect for the creator, for creation, and in a spirit of love and positivity. So I'd like conversations like that. Here's what I also know about the Somali community. That's what I think I know about it anyway, is the language Somali and the Somali people pride themselves in their um, the love affair with speech and language and words. Somalis are poets,
Yes.
poets and singers, and they have this phenomenal ability to understand the power of speech and the power of words, and to be like weavers of stories and songs and dreams and tales. Weavers of the history, and also in doing so, uh, cast pathways into the future. And I think that's a powerful cultural component that I hope that the Somali community and other East African communities never lose, but guard and protect and grow, because it'll change and innovate in a new land. Have you ever thought about um, does the community, as you understand it, think about the historical meaning of what's happened in the past 20 years, where probably a third of the population of Somalia has been forced out of Somalia and now is in Canada, in UK, in Sweden, in the US, in Australia, France, probably in the Caribbean and South America too. I don't hear much of that, but the Somali communities have, in a way that probably is unprecedented, moved all over the world. So what do the elders in the community and what do you all think is the meaning of that? Is there a purpose for that?
Well, yeah, because Somalia is still dealing with conflict. Even though the war started in 1990, it's still happening today. We still have a government. There's a lot of corruption in the government. There's a lot of tribalism and wars happening with different tribes and stuff, which causes more, disruption in the region and stuff like that. So people have left to, get a better life and a better living. A lot of them have the desire to go back to their countries when it's nice and stable, but for now they're trying to move to places where they can get proper education, proper medical services and things like that, so they can live a healthier life. But a lot of them yearn to go back to their countries. Like, for example, my parents left way before when the war was developing, right? So they seen things happening, and that's when they left. And now they think to themselves that they want to go back, but they think, is it safe to go back? There is a government there, but like there's still a lot of things that we really need to overcome as a community and as a nation in Somalia to be fair and try not to use tribalism as a way of dividing, because that's what is happening right now. And it's unfortunate because there's different tribes who are on the other side of the conflict, and they're the ones who are experiencing some of the dangers and the effects of war and stuff, where other tribes are they're in a very safe zone. So it's just there's a lot of how should I say this? It's just depending on the tribe you're in, sometimes you won't be in a safer place. So people just move out to get, again, a better way of life and a better living for their children, especially because they want them to get better education and better healthcare and things like that. But once Somalia does, and, fingers crossed, it's working towards being a better, stable country, a lot of people will possibly go back and bring services there, and like maybe bring mental health services back to Somalia and better health care facilities and things like that.
Well, I could ask you questions for about 10 more days, but I'm not going to. I want to thank you for being here and tell you how much I appreciate you and your work and the mission that you're on. And whenever Insight News or those of us here at Hawthorne or other community agencies can support you, we'd be glad to. I'm going to invite you to come to the Friday session that we do. And I don't know if you guys know Dr. Bravada Garrett Akinsanya. She has a group called the African American Child Wellness Institute, but she's a psychologist and mental health professional. And on Fridays, I have a panel of PhD psychologists and sociologists who talk about mental health in African people and African American people. So I think that you need to be in that conversation as well, because I wondered as you were speaking how many Somali or East African psychologists or psychiatrists are there in the community? Is there a practice at all, or do you know if there are any?
I mean, I'm starting to see a lot more people going into school for counseling, mental health, and substance use. It's definitely getting there. Like my sister, she's actually a clinical therapist as well, but she's still working towards doing the actual counseling and things like that. But I am starting to see a lot more people understanding that there's a need in our community, so they can provide those services to their people in a language that they're able to understand. But I think we're growing, and I think we're getting better.
Well, I'm going to reach out back to you. I'll have Diana give me your contact information and invite you both and others if you wish, so that we can continue the conversation. I'm interested also in how we continue the conversation between African Americans, those of us who've been here for generations, and those who are newly arrived, and how we work past the sometimes manufactured disagreements. But the disagreements that we have here, if you're from South High School, right? I know for a long time, South was always a problem with what the elders would say, food fights, kids doing food in the cafeteria, but the outside media wanted to make it a big racial, a cultural war between Somali kids and Black American. If we don't control the narrative, it's like Dr. Ben was saying, if we don't control the narrative, they'll say things that keep us at each other's throats and keep us away from each other instead of working together to build what we will both benefit from it and what society will benefit from. So I think that we've got some work to do, and I think we're capable. Listen, thank you so much, Diana, Dee, Brenda, thank you all so much. I'm Al McFarlane. This is Conversations with Al McFarlane. We'll see you tomorrow. Take care. Bye-bye.
Nice meeting both of you.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you guys.
Okay, good program. I think I'm done now. All right, now I'll talk to you later, Brenda, okay?
Yeah, I'm heading out.
Okay, take care. Bye-bye.